How did an ordinary day turn into a scene of unimaginable tragedy? She killed her mom. Those chilling words were uttered by Heath Smiley in a frantic 911 call that would shock even the most seasoned responders. Behind the walls of a quiet home in Brandon, Mississippi, a teenager had committed an unthinkable act, murdering her mother and attempting to kill her stepfather. What could drive a 14-year-old to such violence? And what does this case reveal about the fragile line between family bonds and breaking points? Stay tuned as we uncover the disturbing story of Carly Gregg, the events leading to that fateful moment, and the haunting aftermath that followed. Before we dive into the story, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories that leave you questioning the depths of human nature. Ashley Smiley was a 40-year-old high school math teacher, known for her dedication to her students and her family. She lived with her husband, Heath Smiley, and her teenage daughter, Carly Gregg, in the quiet town of Brandon, Mississippi. On the surface, their lives seemed ordinary, even peaceful. But on March 19, 2024, that peaceful facade was shattered. That day, Ashley's life came to a tragic end, at the hands of her own daughter. Carly Gregg, just 14 years old, shot her mother multiple times and then turned the gun on her stepfather, Heath. Heath, though gravely injured, managed to escape and make the 911 call that would reveal the horror unfolding inside their home. This case shocked not only the community of Brandon but the entire nation. How could a teenager commit such a calculated and violent act? As the details of the case emerged, they painted a complex picture, one involving strained family dynamics, Carly's struggles with mental health, and questions about whether this crime was premeditated or a desperate act influenced by deeper psychological issues. In the weeks and months that followed, the case would take center stage in courtrooms and newsrooms, raising troubling questions about juvenile crime, mental health, and the pursuit of justice. Today, we'll explore these questions as we examine the life, the crime, and the trial of Carly Gregg. Carly Gregg, just 14 years old at the time of the crime, was a bright and seemingly typical teenager. She attended school, hung out with friends, and was known for her wit and intelligence. But beneath the surface, Carly's life was far from ordinary. Carly had a complex relationship with her mother, Ashley Smiley. Ashley was a respected high school math teacher, admired by her students and colleagues for her patience and dedication. She was the kind of teacher who would stay late to tutor struggling students and always made time for her family. Yet, the mother-daughter bond between Ashley and Carly was strained. Friends and family members described frequent arguments, often over Carly's behavior, her schoolwork, and the usual tensions of raising a teenager. Ashley's remarriage to Heath Smiley, Carly's stepfather, added another layer of complexity to their family dynamic. Heath was a supportive partner to Ashley and worked hard to build a relationship with Carly, but blending families is never easy. Carly reportedly struggled with feelings of resentment and isolation, common among children navigating the changes that come with a parent's new marriage. In the months leading up to the crime, Carly's behavior began to change. Friends and teachers noticed she was withdrawing from social activities, her grades started to slip, and she appeared increasingly irritable. Privately, Carly was battling mental health issues that no one fully understood at the time. She began experiencing severe depression and auditory hallucinations, voices in her head that reportedly encouraged violent thoughts. Mental health professionals would later testify that Carly had shared these struggles with her mother, but Ashley, overwhelmed by the demands of her job and family life, didn't grasp the severity of the situation. Carly's mental health issues went largely untreated, leaving her to cope with these challenges alone. Adding to the pressure were the societal expectations placed on teenagers like Carly. In the age of social media, young people are often faced with an unrelenting need to project perfection, perfect grades, perfect friendships, perfect lives. Carly was no exception. She spent hours online, comparing herself to others and feeling increasingly inadequate. Compounding her mental health struggles were the pressures of living in a household where academic excellence and discipline were highly valued. Ashley's role as a teacher and her dedication to education meant she had high expectations for Carly's performance in school. While these expectations were set with good intentions, they may have added to Carly's sense of failure and frustration. Friends later reported that Carly began to act out in small ways, testing boundaries and seeking attention. She became more defiant, challenging her mother's rules and authority. These moments of rebellion often escalated into heated arguments, leaving both Ashley and Carly feeling misunderstood and disconnected. Heath Smiley, though deeply concerned, found himself caught in the middle. He tried to mediate between Ashley and Carly, but his efforts often fell short. He loved Ashley and wanted to support her, yet he also recognized Carly's struggles and wanted to help her feel heard. Unfortunately, the family dynamic grew increasingly tense, creating an environment where emotions ran high and communication broke down. In the weeks leading up to the crime, Carly's behavior took an even darker turn. She reportedly became fixated on violent media, spending hours consuming stories about crime and murder. Her friends noticed she began making unsettling comments, joking about death and violence in ways that made them uneasy. Carly also started withdrawing even further, retreating into her own world and isolating herself from those around her. Despite these warning signs, no one could have predicted the horror that would unfold. To outsiders, the Smiley household appeared like any other, filled with the usual ups and downs of family life. But behind closed doors, a storm was brewing, one fueled by untreated mental illness, unresolved tensions, and the weight of societal expectations. March 19, 2024, started like any other day in the Smiley household, but by evening, it would become the setting of an unthinkable tragedy. Carly Gregg had spent the day plotting an act that would forever change her life and the lives of everyone around her. The tension in the house had been mounting for weeks, and Carly, only 14 years old, was harboring feelings of resentment and anger that had reached a boiling point. Armed with a .357 Magnum pistol, her stepfather Heath Smiley's firearm, Carly prepared for what she later described as a premeditated plan to end her mother's life. The house was quiet when Carly approached her mother, Ashley Smiley, who was seated in the living room. Ashley, unaware of the danger, was focused on her own tasks, possibly grading papers or preparing for the next day at school. Without hesitation, Carly raised the gun and fired the first shot. The deafening sound of the gunshot echoed through the home, catching Ashley completely off guard. The first bullet struck Ashley, but it didn't kill her instantly. She managed to stand, stunned and disoriented, her mind racing to comprehend what was happening. Carly, showing no signs of hesitation, fired a second shot. This time, it brought Ashley to the ground. Carly then fired a third and final shot, ensuring that her mother would not survive. What went through Carly's mind in those moments is something only she can truly answer. Was it rage? A sense of power? Or was she, as later argued in court, driven by the voices in her head, urging her to commit this heinous act? But Carly's actions didn't stop there. In an almost surreal twist, she picked up her phone and invited a friend over to the house. The friend, unaware of the crime that had just occurred, received a chilling text message from Carly, "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" When the friend arrived, Carly led them into the living room, where Ashley's lifeless body lay on the floor. The friend, horrified, begged Carly to call the police, but Carly refused. Instead, she seemed disturbingly calm, even detached, as if the gravity of what she had done hadn't sunk in. As evening turned to night, Carly's stepfather, Heath Smiley, returned home. He had no idea what awaited him inside. The house was eerily quiet as he entered, calling out for Ashley or Carly. It wasn't until he stepped into the living room that he saw Ashley's body. Before Heath could fully process the scene, Carly emerged, holding the same .357 Magnum pistol. She pointed the gun at him and fired. The bullet struck Heath, but it didn't kill him. Bleeding and in immense pain, he managed to retreat, using every ounce of strength he had to escape the house. Outside, Heath stumbled to a neighbor's home, desperately seeking help. He managed to make a 911 call, his voice strained and trembling as he told the dispatcher, "She killed her mom." Despite his injuries, Heath's focus remained on alerting authorities to what had happened, hoping they could intervene before anyone else was hurt. Back at the house, Carly showed no signs of panic. She remained inside, pacing and waiting, her calm demeanor a chilling contrast to the violence she had unleashed. The walls of the Smiley home, once filled with the sounds of family life, now bore silent witness to a brutal and senseless crime. This was no impulsive act of teenage rebellion, it was a calculated, deliberate crime that left one person dead, another critically injured, and a community forever scarred. The events of that day would haunt everyone involved, raising questions about Carly's motivations and the warning signs that had gone unnoticed. When Heath Smiley's desperate 911 call came through, law enforcement in Brandon, Mississippi, wasted no time. Officers arrived at the Smiley home within minutes, finding Heath outside, bleeding from a gunshot wound. Weak but coherent, Heath repeated the chilling words that had shocked the dispatcher: "She killed her mom." Inside the house, the scene was nothing short of horrifying. Officers found Ashley Smiley's lifeless body in the living room. Blood pooled on the floor around her, and the gunshots had left visible evidence of their destructive force. The .357 Magnum pistol used in the crime was lying nearby, its presence confirming Heath's story. But what struck investigators immediately was the eerie calm of Carly Gregg. She was still in the house, showing no signs of panic or remorse. When officers approached her, she neither resisted nor fled. Instead, she reportedly said, "I know why you're here." Her tone was flat, almost indifferent, as if she fully understood the gravity of the situation yet felt detached from it. Carly was taken into custody without incident, but the real work for law enforcement had just begun. Investigators needed to piece together what had happened, and, more importantly, why. Forensic teams meticulously combed through the Smiley home, documenting every detail. Blood spatter patterns around Ashley's body confirmed that she had been shot multiple times at close range. The positioning of the body suggested that the attack was deliberate and targeted, not the result of a struggle. The gun, a .357 Magnum registered to Heath Smiley, was dusted for fingerprints. Carly's prints were found all over the weapon, corroborating her stepfather's account. Investigators also found several spent shell casings, which matched the gun, further tying Carly to the crime. Surprisingly, there were no signs of forced entry or external threats, eliminating the possibility of an intruder. It became clear that this was an internal family tragedy, carried out by someone who had intimate access to the home and its occupants. In the hours following her arrest, Carly was interrogated by detectives. Her demeanor was unnervingly calm, even as she recounted the events leading up to the crime. At first, she admitted to shooting her mother but claimed it was in self-defense, a statement that puzzled investigators given the evidence at the scene. Carly later changed her story, suggesting she had been coerced by voices in her head. She told detectives that these voices had been with her for months, urging her to harm her family. Mental health professionals were brought in to assess her claims, but her conflicting statements made it difficult to determine the truth. One of the most significant breakthroughs in the investigation came from surveillance footage retrieved from nearby homes and businesses. The footage painted a chilling picture of Carly's actions after the crime. In one clip, Carly was seen leaving the house shortly after the murder, casually walking down the street as if nothing had happened. She entered a local convenience store, purchased snacks, and returned home. Her calm demeanor during this time was unsettling and raised questions about her mental state. Detectives also examined Carly's phone and social media accounts. They discovered the disturbing text message she sent to a friend, "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" This message, sent shortly after Ashley's death, indicated premeditation and a troubling lack of remorse. Further analysis of her phone revealed internet searches related to murder, crime scenes, and how to manipulate firearms. These searches, conducted in the days leading up to the murder, provided prosecutors with key evidence to argue that Carly's actions were not impulsive but carefully planned. As the investigation continued, attention turned to Carly's mental health. Detectives learned that Carly had been experiencing auditory hallucinations and severe depression in the months leading up to the crime. School records and witness statements corroborated this, with teachers and friends describing her as withdrawn and increasingly erratic. Mental health experts conducted evaluations, seeking to determine whether Carly's claims about hearing voices were genuine or a ploy to avoid responsibility. While some experts believed her condition was real, others pointed out inconsistencies in her accounts, suggesting she may have been exaggerating her symptoms to garner sympathy. One of the biggest challenges faced by law enforcement was unraveling Carly's true motive. Was she driven by mental illness, or were her actions the result of deep-seated anger and resentment toward her mother and stepfather? The evidence seemed to suggest both. Detectives also had to contend with the public's reaction to the case. News of a 14-year-old girl killing her mother and attempting to kill her stepfather spread quickly, sparking debates about juvenile crime, mental health, and parental responsibility. Despite these challenges, investigators remained focused on building a solid case. Every piece of evidence, from Carly's fingerprints on the gun to her chilling text messages, painted a picture of a teenager grappling with internal demons, external pressures, and a growing capacity for violence. By the time the investigation concluded, law enforcement had assembled a comprehensive narrative of the events leading up to and following the crime. But the question remained, was Carly Gregg a cold-blooded killer or a troubled teenager pushed to the brink? As the case moved to trial, these questions would take center stage, forcing a courtroom, and a nation, to grapple with the complexities of justice, mental health, and the human capacity for both harm and healing. The trial of Carly Gregg was one of the most highly anticipated legal cases of the year, drawing national attention for its shocking details and the questions it raised about mental health, juvenile crime, and accountability. With the evidence collected, prosecutors were confident they could prove Carly's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But the defense had a very different narrative to present, one centered on Carly's mental state and her capacity to understand the consequences of her actions. From the start, the prosecution laid out a chilling timeline of events, emphasizing Carly's premeditation. They argued that this was not an act of spontaneous violence but a calculated murder. Prosecutors presented the text message Carly had sent to her friend, "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" as a critical piece of evidence. They pointed to her internet searches, which included terms like "how to kill someone" and "how to handle a gun," as further proof of her intent. The surveillance footage of Carly calmly walking to a convenience store after the murder was another key point. It painted a picture of a teenager who was not panicked or remorseful but disturbingly composed. This, they argued, contradicted the defense's claim that Carly was in a psychotic state when she committed the crime. Forensic evidence solidified their case. Carly's fingerprints were found on the .357 Magnum, and the trajectory of the bullets indicated that her mother, Ashley Smiley, had been shot at close range in a deliberate manner. Prosecutors described the attack on her stepfather, Heath Smiley, as an attempt to eliminate a witness, further underscoring the premeditation behind her actions. The defense, however, presented a starkly different version of events. They argued that Carly was not a cold-blooded killer but a deeply troubled teenager suffering from severe mental illness. Psychiatrists called to the stand testified that Carly had been diagnosed with depression and auditory hallucinations prior to the crime. They explained that Carly had reported hearing voices urging her to harm her family and herself, and that these voices had become increasingly insistent in the weeks leading up to the murder. The defense also highlighted Carly's strained relationship with her mother and the immense pressure she felt at home and school. They described her as a child overwhelmed by emotions and circumstances she could not control, leading her to commit a horrific act in a state of mental collapse. One of the defense's most compelling witnesses was Carly herself. Taking the stand, she tearfully recounted her experiences with the voices in her head, her feelings of isolation, and her deep regret over what had happened. Her testimony moved some in the courtroom to tears, but it also raised questions about whether she was being entirely truthful or attempting to manipulate the jury. After weeks of testimony, the jury began deliberations. It was a difficult decision, with jurors weighing Carly's age and mental health against the undeniable evidence of premeditation and deliberate action. Ultimately, the jury reached a verdict. Carly Gregg was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a harsh sentence that underscored the severity of her crimes. The case sparked a firestorm of media coverage and public debate. News outlets dissected every detail of the trial, from Carly's demeanor in court to the arguments made by the prosecution and defense. True crime enthusiasts followed the story closely, while psychologists and legal experts debated the broader implications of the case. Public opinion was deeply divided. Some saw Carly as a victim of a broken system, an adolescent failed by her family, her school, and the mental health professionals who could have intervened earlier. Others viewed her as a dangerous individual who had made a conscious choice to take the lives of those closest to her. The sentence of life without parole ignited further controversy. Critics argued that it was too harsh for someone so young, pointing to the potential for rehabilitation. Supporters of the sentence, however, felt it was appropriate given the calculated nature of the crime and the devastating impact on the victims and their families. In the months following the trial, the Smiley family and their community struggled to heal. Heath Smiley, who had survived the attempted murder, became a vocal advocate for mental health awareness, sharing his story in hopes of preventing similar tragedies. Carly's case also sparked discussions about the criminal justice system and how it handles cases involving juveniles with mental health issues. Advocacy groups called for reforms, arguing that cases like Carly's highlight the need for more compassionate and nuanced approaches to juvenile crime. But for those directly affected, the wounds remained raw. The Smiley home, once a place of love and family, stood as a grim reminder of the events of March 19, 2024. And for Carly Gregg, the rest of her life would be spent behind bars, grappling with the consequences of her actions and the question of what might have been. As the story of Carly Gregg came to a close, it left behind a legacy of pain, reflection, and unanswered questions. How could this tragedy have been prevented? And what can society do to ensure that no other family endures such a devastating loss? These are questions that continue to linger, long after the courtroom doors have closed. The case of Carly Gregg forces us to confront a difficult reality: the intersection of juvenile crime and mental health is fraught with complexities. How does society balance accountability with compassion when a young person's actions are influenced by mental illness? Carly's story raises troubling questions about the adequacy of mental health support for adolescents. Could earlier intervention have prevented this tragedy? Were the warning signs overlooked, or was the system simply ill-equipped to address her needs? As we consider the verdict and its consequences, we are left grappling with the deeper implications of this case. Was justice truly served? And how do we, as a society, address the underlying issues that lead to such devastating outcomes? The case of Carly Gregg is a heartbreaking reminder of the devastating consequences of untreated mental health issues and fractured family dynamics. A mother lost her life, a stepfather barely survived, and a teenager will spend the rest of her days behind bars. What are your thoughts on this case? Share them in the comments below. Do you believe justice was served? If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Join us next time as we unravel another chilling true crime story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. See you soon.